Dear members of the Stakeholders Workshop, I am Philippe Hubert. I'm the director of the Pepper platform. I will present you the experience we gained on the validation we have organized. We had to answer two questions. By whom was your validation study organized? By whom was your validation study funded? Actually, for Pepper, this is a strange question because at the same time we are funding and organizing validation on endocrine disruption, and we are funded to do that. So we receive funds from public and private stakeholders, and with those funds we fund the labs and we also organize the validation. This is due to the fact that validation is a common good and that some key players accepted to contribute jointly by pooling their resources for this common good. We are doing validations at present on 9 methods, not all of them being at the same stage of development. Some are at the stage of the blind ring trial, others are just being selected. What's interesting is that they are very different. Some are very simple in vitro methods like transactivation. Others are simple but nevertheless expensive because they use a lot of consumables like kits. Others are capital intensive because they use sophisticated equipment like mass spectrometry. There is some in vivo with embryos, and so there is different kind of methods which are not working the same way when you do the validation. So we have been asked about the laboratory management design, and I inserted the validation study design because to us it's very important. So we do believe that there is a preliminary step before starting transferability. We have to identify the challenges with the developer. First, we see what are the required equipments and consumables in detail. We tune the SOP, which is very classical. We tune the reporting templates. What we are also doing with the dev lab is to check all the property issues. There are some ethics point of view sometimes. For example, when you use human material, and of course we ask the dev lab to build up what might be the cost for one run in real factor. That means not only money but time, the hours that might be spent. So this results sometimes in some changes. For example, we have been moving from primary cells to cell lines for neuroprogenitors for ethical and also availability reasons. Sometimes we have changed and used already differentiated cells from a provider rather than introducing the differentiation within the SOP. Those are two examples. And having all those information, then we can start the sizing of the validation, the number of test items, we can know what is the expected duration, and we also have an idea of the expected cost of offers. So once this is done, we can start the laboratory selection with a classical call for tender. We add to this call for tender information we need on contingency and continuity plan. Also, we have now a template for a contract, which is very useful. Even though some labs need to adapt it, it may save a lot of time. It's a matter of months sometimes. And we also discuss with the lab about its flexibility because it's important in the system. For the organization, usually we have 3 labs, and sometimes less than 3. When we go to reference chemicals, we may go down to 2 labs. So The other question is about the selection and procurement of reference chemicals. Well, this is a very big issue. Sometimes the reference chemicals are readily available. That was the case for one thyroid method we had. Otherwise, we have to go through a literature survey, which can be quite heavy work, looking at not only in vitro, but when there is in vivo or epidemiology or clinical observations, of course, with the keywords that are associated with the method under study. For example, the receptor activation or the sex alteration in birds. One of the difficulties is that the publications are not always detailed enough, and there is also the publication bias, which alter the pictures. So, of course, we try to have all this challenged or completed by experts' views from the validation management groups, or what we can find in review papers on ToxCast data. After that, the reference chemicals are just bought from commercial providers, and we use an external labs to do the preparation, the blinding of substances, of the safety sheets, and the shipping. The main organizational challenges, there are many, so I didn't want to list all of them. I think the first one is to keep the pace, because the lab do not work at the same pace. There are shortages, there are substances that are not delivered, there are pauses that we need for the analysis. So the answer to that was to start, and that's quite important, with the training of the test labs in the dev lab premises. Then we have to organize cooperation so that the labs are in the mood and in the possibility to exchange consumables when one is lacking and the other has more than needed. And of course, we have extra reference substances, because if a substance is missing, we need to have a contingency substance. Other point is to organize the validation management group. And this is not so easy, because there are not so many experts which are very keen of what are the validation issues. And anyway, we have to combine with academics which are more involved in the mechanistic of the methods, for example, or in our case, on endocrine disruption. And the last point is data management and statistics. The trouble is that we have to deal with many, many reports and files to correct, to assemble, and to compile with several versions. And there are few biostatisticians which are very specialists of validation. So what we did is to limit the role of the specialist to the real expertise, and to handle the data management separately by another statistician or another team. The main financial challenges, well, the basic one is to find money, but if you go more in detail, you see some issues. First, the point is that the costs for the support to laboratories are very difficult to predict. You can see on the left of the slide the difference in the costs of support to laboratories according to the methods. You see that there is a factor of 10, which can be explained, of course, because some are more simple than others, but it is not the only explanation. If you see on the right the differences in the cost of the offers we did receive, you see that there is a factor of about 7 between the most expensive and the less expensive, and that is because the labs are from different sectors, possibly, but also some of the labs offer some in-kind work. So it's very difficult to predict what will cost a validation. And besides, once you've started, the cost can evolve. And in 2 cases, we had to increase from about 20% the cost that we had to pay to the labs, because there were additional requirements. And of course, another point is that you don't know exactly what is the cost to the lab, because there is an in-kind contribution, which is sometimes very important and that you do not know. And you have also the cost of the paper staff, which can be important, and especially when the organizations becomes tricky. And it will increase also if you go further in this submission to OECD and to the mutual acceptance of data, then you have more work to do. So what we think is that we are in a favorable position at Pepper because we have a global program, and we can balance the costs when it is cheaper than we envisage or more expensive than we envisage. And it is much more difficult if you have just one single method to found, because it's difficult to find what might be the exact cost. To come to a conclusion, factors which are favorable. There is something which is trivial, a simple, fast and mature method with already existing reference chemicals allows an easy validation. But there is the real life, and there we put first a good preparation with the developer that reduces the delays, the lead times and the extra costs. Then we put the stress on the transferability phase. We think that the test labs have to be aware of what is the process and its hazards so that they are not surprised. And we think also that there is a need for a rigorous monitoring by the validation team in order to react to every incident. And as regards to the cost, we have to raise the awareness among possible founders that validation costs are not so high when you compare to the development cost, and that there is also an important in-kind contribution from partners. Then there are not only what you can do in the validation itself, but there are upstream improvements when you are funding research. And I think the readiness of methods should be a criterion incorporated in the call for research. And also that there should be a parallel work which should be launched on reference chemicals. So I thank you for your attention.